It actually started a couple of decades ago. And what I will start this presentation off with is a short review of three industries that we think you will be very familiar with, the three most influential industries of modern time. Industry number one, the telephone. Most people that are watching this broadcast can remember when the telephone was this little black device with a rotary dial, and almost everybody had the exact same looking phone. In fact, depending upon what part of the country you were in, you may share the phone line with some of your neighbors in a party line. To have a private line was a premium, an option that people had to pay extra for. Well, we watched that industry explode from that one little device to push-button phones in the home, to wireless phones in the home, to wireless phones outside of the home with cell phones. And we now live in a modern world when there were over 100 million cell phones bought just last year. Now, what I'd like you to pay attention to is that although most of us can remember and we watched right there in front of us the evolution of the telephone industry, there were generally two groups of people that made this observation. Our team affectionately calls these two groups of people the birds and the bees. Well, have you ever noticed how birds can fly along and a big formation of birds, like a big cloud of birds, and all of a sudden, seemingly on the turn of a dime, that entire cloud of birds makes a sharp turn and they all turn in concert? Well, how do birds do that? Well, what birds do as they fly along in their flock is they look at the birds next to them and they see what the birds next to them are doing. And really what happens when a critical number of birds in the cloud make a turn, everybody else just follows, and what happens is the entire cloud makes a turn. Well, consumers act in very similar ways. The consumers move along in one direction, and then all of a sudden, the entire mass of consumers makes a turn. So in the example we gave you with the telephone, the big mass of consumers made the turn from the little black rotary dial telephone to the push button telephones, and then they all turned again to the wireless telephones in the home, and they all have turned now and are continuing to turn into the mobile or cell phone industry. Well, there was another group of people that made the same observation but drew completely different conclusions. We call these people the bees. Have you ever looked at a beehive? When you look at a beehive, from a distance, you don't really know what's going on. There's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of activity. There's probably danger. Maybe you feel like it might be a little bit dangerous to approach it. And although you don't know individually what's happening, you somehow know that they're in the process of making honey. Well, in the analogy of the telephone industry, in order for that telephone to move from the black telephone to the push-button telephone to wireless in the home to wireless outside of the home, there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that had to take action and make that change possible. They had to create the companies, they had to create the partnerships, the alliances, make the investments, make all the different parts of all the different things that had to be assembled to make that telephone industry evolve. And this is what we would like you to pay attention to. When the birds made the turn, the bees made money. So when the product evolved, when the industry evolved and the mass amount of consumers changed their buying habits, changed their using habits, the people involved in creating the change were the people that profited. Well, there's industry number two, the television industry. Most people that are watching this broadcast can remember, at least if you're old as I am, you can remember when you could only probably get 3 or 4 television stations in clearly. But if you had, whoever was the youngest usually got assigned to turning the antenna, and if you turned it just right, you may be able to pull in another station or two. Television came on at around 6 in the morning, went off at around midnight, and they played the national anthem. Cartoons only came on one time a week, and that was pretty much Saturday, and they were done by noon. The news only came on at 6 p.m. Most of us remember this world, and when that was the state of the world, it was the state of the art. It was the best that industry had to offer. But then the bees Understanding what the future had in store, they started doing all the activity. They started buzzing. They started making investments, making moves, making changes, creating companies, creating products, creating alliances that gave birth to the evolution of that industry. And then the birds, the people, the consumers, watched that industry evolve from that television that had 5 stations to cable televisions that had 50 to the modern state of television where there are 500 or more possible television options. Again, there were 2 groups of people observing the same things, making 2 different types of decisions. Industry number 3, the computers and the internet. Most people that are watching this broadcast, if you're at least as old as I am, you remember when you nor none of your friends owned a computer. And in fact, you may not have even used a computer at your job. And we watched that industry evolve from that to people having computers all over the workspace to now most people you know having 1 computer in their house at least. Some people have 1 computer in every room. We now live in a world where computers are built inside of other appliances. Toasters and refrigerators and washing machines, wristwatches and telephones. We live in a world where there are more computers now than there are people in this country. But again, there were 2 groups of people who watched the evolution of that industry and made 2 completely different types of observations and decisions and actions. One group simply changed and adopted and consumed the new devices as they came along. The other group of people, the bees, made all of that change possible. They acted in advance of the consumers, creating the computers, writing all the software programs, making all the services available, making all the companies that would provide all the services, and putting all the management in line and all the investments in line. There were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people taking the necessary action to allow the computer industry to evolve as it has right before our eyes. Now, the reason we like to start off this presentation with the short history of those 3 industries is because many people will argue that those are the 3 most influential and wealthiest industries of modern time. And those industries are still evolving. We have assembled this presentation today. We have put this information today. We are gathered here today because those industries are still evolving. They are still moving forward. They are still driving forward into the future, and they are all headed for the exact same place. This intersection of the 3 most influential and wealthiest industries of our time is an intersection called convergence. At this intersection of convergence, all of these industries will start to blend in their functionality. So you will start to see telephones starting to do some things that used to be reserved for computers. Computers will start to have the capabilities that used to be reserved for telephones. Televisions will start to adopt some of the capabilities that used to be reserved for both the computers and the telephone. And this convergence, this coming together of the 3 most influential and wealthiest and fastest changing industries of modern time has created the single greatest opportunity of our time. And that is what we're here to talk about today.